welcome to this year's GEFCon. So we're delighted to be hosting today a panel session on Singapore Gaming's Global Hub. Really interesting topic, and we're delighted to be joined by three fantastic panelists today to discuss this topic. My name is Asahi Takano. I have the privilege of moderating today's session. My day job is as the head of Asia Pacific for Portus Consulting, the leading management consultancy dedicated to sport. And we have the pleasure of working with GEF and the government of Singapore over the past year on a study to explore Singapore's opportunity in esports, which is obviously the topic of today's discussion. Today's session is all about Singapore. So what do we need to do? What's the opportunity? What is the impact that the esports and gaming industry could have on the country? To help kick off this session, before we go into the panel, what I'd like to do is just to set a bit of a backdrop. And I'm going to ask my colleague Sophie to share us a quick presentation to set the scene. Sophie, over to you.
Thanks, Asahi. So today we're going to focus on three key questions. Firstly, why is there an esports and gaming opportunity for Singapore? Secondly, how might we go about capturing this opportunity? And finally, what is the potential impact for Singapore if we are able to successfully realise this opportunity? So first, let's explore why there's a real opportunity for Singapore in the esports and gaming space right now. There are three factors at play here. The first being the opportunity to contribute to national policy. And there are many ways in which esports and gaming can contribute to this development, whether through economic impact, such as generating revenues, new jobs, enhancing skills, or boosting technology capability, through social benefits, for example, as a means to engage with the 70% of Singaporeans who currently engage with gaming content, or through health benefits, such as boosting physical activity rates through active gaming. What's particularly interesting is how esports and gaming can benefit adjacent industries. The esports and gaming industry can act as an incubator of human capital through supporting the development of new skills and becoming a hotbed of technology innovation. For example, AR and VR developments are critical in the development of active gaming. Connection speed goes hand in hand with the gaming experience, and gaming companies are currently the driving force behind metaverse advancement. Innovations and expertise developments in these tech areas are then critical in driving growth in adjacent industries. For example, AR is being used by surgeons to provide live information during surgery. VR is used for immersive defense training. Blockchain can create efficiencies in supply chains, such as in the car industry. And AI is improving performance on the pitch and improving safety for athletes in sports such as American football, basketball, and rugby. The second factor to consider is the timely nature of this opportunity. Around the world, global competition is intensifying, and recent market developments have shaken up the market. Singapore has a unique opportunity to become the gateway to the booming and untapped Southeast Asia market and bridge the gap between East and West, connecting the global esports community. Momentum in Singapore around esports and gaming, driven by events such as the current Global Esports Games, means there's no better time to capitalise on this opportunity. Globally, what we see is that countries are racing to grab a slice of the esports and gaming pie. In North America, Canada and the US are investing in game and metaverse development and esports infrastructure. European countries are identifying their value proposition through national strategies. The Middle East have ambitious aims to grow esports and gaming through major events and large-scale infrastructure projects. In Asia, esports leader China are investing in esports tourism, and gaming leader South Korea continue to pave the way in terms of gaming engagement. And finally, closer to home, Southeast Asia countries such as Malaysia and Thailand have dedicated budgets to esports and are increasingly recognizing its value in terms of economic and social development. The third and final factor to consider is why Singapore is well positioned to capture this time-bound opportunity. This is due to significant buy-in from both the public and private sector, which can be harnessed alongside the inherent national advantages and support from GEF. So there are a number of reasons why Singapore is uniquely placed to become a regional and global hub. Singapore can provide businesses and investors with security through its political and market stability, perhaps increasingly important given the unpredictable nature of the esports industry, which we saw recently in the Chinese ban on gaming. Its geopolitical neutrality and central location ensure access to global markets and reinforce Singapore as a well-positioned travel hub. Thirdly, pro-business policies in areas such as tech and R&D development help support new and established businesses in esports and gaming. A highly educated, English-speaking workforce are essential for businesses looking to locate in Singapore. An advanced tech sector and infrastructure such as 5G coverage are attractive propositions. And finally, extensive financial support through grants, a thriving venture capital market, and a strong financial services industry provide a strong foundation for Singapore to grow into a regional and global hub. We see both local and international gaming esports businesses leveraging these inherent competitive advantages. For example, leading esports and gaming companies such as Tencent have selected Singapore as their regional headquarters, joining local success stories such as Razer and non-endemic brands such as Singtel, who are all committed to developing the gaming industry in Singapore. For all of these reasons, we therefore believe there is a real and time-bound opportunity for Singapore to become a regional and global leader in esports and gaming. But how do we realize this opportunity? There are three areas that Singapore could focus on: business and innovation, human capital, and catalysts. The formalization and commitment to a long-term development plan for the industry, which leverages existing resources and policies, will help to nurture a thriving esports and gaming ecosystem. Strategic initiatives could include exploring the possibility of a physical hub for esports and gaming startups, adapting existing policy incentives and schemes for the industry, and finding ways to bring all stakeholders together to encourage collaboration and sector synergies. Singapore could develop a highly productive workforce with opportunities both within and across sectors by actively supporting human capital development and leveraging the esports industry as an incubator of talent. This area would include attracting talent, growing talent, and creating visibility of career opportunities. And finally, catalysts are high-value, highly visible initiatives that engage the community and demonstrate global leadership, which will help turbocharge the industry and workforce growth by strengthening delivery and demonstrating commitment to growth. Singapore's catalysts could include developing an annual cadence of flagship esports events and MICE events, supporting local content creation, and leading the ways in terms of standards and governance principles. So finally, what could this mean for Singapore in terms of impact? There are economic benefits that could be generated, including gaming and esports revenues, new businesses, and opportunities for spillover effects in adjacent industries, and enhancing Singapore's reputation, both in terms of a global esports hub and innovator in related technologies. Human capital benefits could include new, high-quality jobs and development of new skills across extensive career pathways. The benefits also include three areas, however, which potentially aren't as discussed as often as the economic and job benefits: social, health, and sporting. For example, gaming can enhance educational performance, concentration, and engagement, and drive community cohesion through bringing together people from all walks of life across Singapore, driving social development. New friends made through gaming can improve well-being and mental health. And finally, esports provides new sporting opportunities for Singaporeans, especially given that esports is a level playing field when it comes to physical size, shape, and age in comparison to traditional sport. I'll now hand back over to Asahi and look forward to hearing our panelists' thoughts on the opportunity, the strategy, and the impact.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Well, hopefully that's just helped to set a bit of a scene of the kind of things that we can be thinking about and discussing: the opportunity, the strategy and the way forward, and the potential impact that could all have. So at this stage, it's my pleasure to introduce three fantastic panelists today to help us discuss these topics. First of all, we're joined by Mr. Alvin Tan, who is the Minister of State for Trade and Industry and Culture, Community and Youth. We all know MOS is passionate about this topic, and you might have heard him recently give the opening speech at Gamescom Asia on this very topic itself. MOS's background, which includes obviously Goldman Sachs, Facebook, and LinkedIn, means he is certainly no stranger to the world of technology and business. MOS, welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Asahi.
Secondly, delighted to welcome Nicholas Koo, who I'm sure is very familiar to many of you. Nicholas has worked as a business leader across a very diversified career and has most recently been involved with tech startups like Yup.gg and Mighty Bear Games. I think many of you will know Nicholas as the former chairman of Skoga, who was instrumental in bringing 3 major esports world championships to Singapore, and he is also currently an advisor to the board of the Global Esports Federation. Nicholas, welcome to the panel and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Asahi. It's great to meet everyone. Thank you.
Great. And finally, certainly last but not least, a very warm welcome to Christopher Tarr. He is the head of Samsung's mobile services and partnerships in Southeast Asia and Oceania. And in his role, he oversees Samsung's consumer business across regional brands and marketing partnerships for mobile gaming and esports. And over the last 10 years, he has been involved in establishing content and services in Singapore, as well as exploring the opportunities in esports in the region. Chris, thank you very much for your time and look forward to hearing from you, given your interesting perspective from the outside. So, let's crack on. Maybe the opening start question we can focus on is around the opportunity. As Sophie showed, there are lots of reasons why there is an opportunity in Singapore. But perhaps, MOS, if I could start with you, how big really is this opportunity for esports in Singapore? And what excites you most about this space over the coming decade as we look forward?
Well, thank you, Asahi, and thank you to everyone who's come to join us today. Asahi, as you know, just last week, I also spoke at Nexus, your playground. So I've been trying to drive this from the perspective of government for some time now. Nicholas, you know that we have the same kind of interest and same history as well as focus in this growing area. This area excites me because I grew up as a gamer and I still am gaming. And I know, as Sophie had mentioned early on in the presentation, that the opportunity set is beyond gaming to many peripheral and, in fact, very core industries as well. You know, healthcare, manufacturing, the metaverse, content creation, and the likes. So I'm very excited about the opportunity set. If you look at specific to the global esports audience, the global esports audience reached about 474 million in 2021. And half of them are in Asia. And this is expected to grow to 577 million by 2024. If you zoom in down to Southeast Asia, it is also one of the world's fastest growing games and esports markets, and thus presents a huge plethora of opportunities for growth. In 2020 alone, our local games market grew by 15% from 2019. And you zoom closer again, if you look at Singapore now, we are now home to around 220 game development and publishing companies. So you have very familiar names like Ubisoft, Riot, Bandai Namco, and I think it speaks to where Singapore is as one of Asia's leading media and entertainment hubs. But why are we doing this? Well, the growth of the esports and games industry will create new jobs, will create new career paths. We talked about earlier on about software development, e-management, coaching, community managers, shoutcasting. And I've done 1 or 2 shoutcasting before. It's incredibly, it's not as easy as you would see some of the experts. But we also have quite incredible young talent. James Chen, for example, coach of Team SMG, and which is a very, very notable Mobile Legends Bang Bang team in the region that's founded by JJ Lin. And if you look at under James' leadership, their team successfully qualified for M3 that will be held in Singapore this year. So another key event that is being held in Singapore. We also have Desmond Wong, who co-founded Gentle Bros. And their games have now had about 1.3 million downloads worldwide. And they are now exploring the next bound, how AI can be incorporated into their games. Sophie mentioned about metaverse. So, recent innovations in technology, such as this metaverse, will have new exciting opportunities. In fact, the metaverse is where it originated from gaming, didn't it? These worlds, and then you create worlds after worlds after worlds where it's almost infinite. So, but that's just online. Offline, I think what we call phygital will also play a very important role and present a very interesting and exciting opportunity set. Let me go into detail. First, we are trying to now leverage this nexus between physical sports and also active virtual sports or gaming. We have our Singapore Cycling Federation and SCOGA, Nicholas's old outfit, where we're collaborating to promote the development of cycling esports in Singapore. So you will see that it will develop and diversify the development pathways for a lot of cyclists to join the sports. And in fact, we don't just do this because we think there's an opportunity, but there are also overseas case studies to show us, and has in fact shown us how active virtual sports and gaming can be customized for persons with disabilities so that they can increase their activities and social interactions. Then we also have Taekwondo, for example, and World Taekwondo has been working with Refract Technologies, which is a Singapore-based organization, to transform athletes' bodies as game controllers and enabling an immersive and non-contact virtual Taekwondo experience. Finally, we also see a lot of growing local esports athletes. We have, and so it's just, these are the gamers. So we have Daryl Cole, or many of you will know him on Dota 2 as Ice. They're part of the Paris Saint-Germain, which is a Singapore-based esports team that won the Brawl Stars World Finals last year, just 1 year ago. Our own Team Singapore athletes also made us proud by clinching 1 silver and 1 bronze in the 2019 SEA Games, which saw esports make its debut. And esports, in fact, will also feature again in the 2022 SEA Games and will debut as a medal event at the 2022 Asian Games in Hangzhou. So we are very committed to supporting the esports franchise. We're very committed to supporting the esports properties here in Singapore and anchor many of these franchise and properties as Asia and Southeast Asia's hub for gaming. Back to you, Asahi.
Moez, thanks very much. I think what a fantastic overview in terms of, I guess, the breadth of the impact esports can have and the different dimensions, I guess, that we can explore going forward. Nicholas, if I maybe move on to you, I mean, you have your fingers in the pie on the ground. You see a lot of what's going on across the ecosystem, and obviously you've been part of this journey from the start, in a way. In your view, how is this opportunity evolving? It seems to be such a rapidly changing space. How do you see it moving for Singapore?
Thank you, Asahi, and thank you, Mostan. Mostan mentioned about Ice. I was an aspiring pro player myself in Dota, I think like 15 years ago. And I think it was, my 30th game where I lost to Ice. I realized that I should do something else besides trying to be a professional player. The good thing is that our industry has really grown and there's so much opportunities. Like, as you mentioned, for myself, I've been involved in different parts of the ecosystem, but not just myself, right? I've seen a lot of my peers at that time, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, now just find great, meaningful roles and careers in be it in gaming, in esports, or adjacent industries, right? I think what we're seeing is a lot of, we call it like mainstreaming, right? A lot of what we've been participated in used to be a subculture. Now it's becoming mainstream and everyone's talking about it, not just gaming esports, but Sophie and Mostan mentioned about the whole metaverse, nexus of physical and digital active esports and all that. The industry has definitely grown in many, many ways, right? Be it numbers, revenues, participation, but also just maturing in all aspects, all segments, right? We're talking about, as we mentioned, about major global events coming here. I think this year we're hosting quite a number. We see the success of game publishers like Garena, and not just that, right? Even tapping on some of our traditional strengths like manufacturing, right? We see the growth of your Razors, your Secret Labs, and folks from other industries coming in like with their other strengths like broadcast, for example, One Championship, right? Personally, I've been involved in also the games development side, a lot of investments. It's a very long-term play, and I think Singapore went in really early, about 10, 15 years ago. We're seeing some results. And like I myself am involved with Mighty Bear Games, and we've been kind of like killing it along with the whole Apples and Disneys of the world, And I think we're seeing a lot more emerging opportunity in besides metaverse, like in your blockchain gaming and all that. So I think one thing I would call out is that we obviously have developed and built a very strong infrastructure, right? And I think it's well placed to tap on the opportunity, but also for platforms to tap on it, right? So in fact, that's how I think Garena really started. It started as building a platform to connect gamers, and I think I'm involved in like platform like Yup.gg. We're trying to connect gamers and all that. And I think it's just the beginning, right? After 15 years, it still feels like we are right at the beginning, and so much more exciting opportunities ahead. A lot of maturity, but so much more. Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, so we've heard from two Singaporeans about how great Singapore is, but I think perhaps it'd be interesting just to see, Christopher, from your perspective, from the Samsung perspective, so essentially an outsider initially, exploring this opportunity, how does this resonate with your journey and how you're seeing the opportunity evolve and develop with regards to esports in Singapore?
Thank you. Well, first, I would say I'm a bit of an outsider versus my esteemed colleagues here. Still on the learning curve of gaming and esports. I think it's in some ways just the beginning. But I probably am representative of many other brands in the region, both Singapore as well as global brands, where we're still ramping up in some ways. I think I've seen this the 10 years that I've been with Samsung here in the region. We've really expanded our capabilities across digital. And when I first came, it was at an earlier stage, and I see gaming and esports in a similar trajectory. Now, probably ahead of the curve has been some of our subsidiaries. Some of the countries have a more emphasis on this than others, and some have been more progressive in going out and participating with some of the esports events or even the teams. And that I think learning has helped. But it's not. It's something that has to grow within the organization to really understand. For us, and I think for a lot of brands, the young Gen Z and the others are really important segment for us to engage and are relevant for us for growth. So we're finding ways to engage with them, and especially with mobile. That is even more so. And out here in the region, seeing mobile gaming actually being democratized with the likes of MLBB and Free Fire going across at all levels of devices and consumers across the region. So that I think is very noticeable. So in the past 2 years, we've kind of dipped our toes in the water. I have at the regional level, working with Razer, working with One Esports on some regional events. But as I mentioned, it's still, I think, early. We still need to find ways, I think, to integrate our across the region. As opposed to local events, to untap and synergize across what we're doing, and to integrate those across some of our marketing activities and the way that we engage with influencers and players and teams and leagues in the region. I think we still have a long ways to go, like the others were saying, but it's an exciting journey. And one that I think we're getting more and more engaged on, and trying to find new ways to engage our customers.
That's really interesting, Chris. I guess if we then, we started with MOS and Nicholas, I think laying a very strong case for the fact that the foundations are in place and the opportunity looks obvious in many ways. But perhaps coming from a brand perspective, perhaps we're assuming that there is an obvious link, but perhaps it's not as obvious as people think it is. Do you feel that brands, fully understand this opportunity, perhaps in Singapore? And, if not, how can we bridge that gap to help the brands actually engage more with the opportunity?
That's a good question. I think there's a number of ways to help bridge the gap. I mean, on the front end of it, I think it's about education. understanding the consumer, and how showing how mainstream this is becoming. I think there may be a perception for some folks that it's not yet mainstream, but the reality is, in many of the countries in Southeast Asia, it's quite mainstream, and it's growing. We're the fastest growing region. So that perception, I think, has to change, and the way to do that, I think, is through better information, better education on this, and how that relates to people's marketing as well. In terms of how does this segment address the needs of brands when it comes to brand awareness, product recommendation, and purchase intent. I think what we've experienced is that by participating and finding authentic ways to work with the industry and our brands and our products, that it has an oversized impact across these KPIs. And I think that by showing case studies, by educating the brands how they can better reach this relevant segment through this, and show how impactful and how mainstream this is becoming, we can attract more to brands to participate and take it as more of their core activities.
Very clear. I mean, I guess Nicholas sort of, as almost a supply side of helping perhaps these brands to engage with Singapore, what kind of activities and initiatives have already been put in place to try to answer Chris's questions, as it were? And kind of what more do you think needs to be done and can be done?
Yeah, Sahi, I remember, I think it was in like 2008, 2009, about 10 years ago, I was leading trade missions with, at the time, MDA, IDA to countries like China. And there was really quite strong support at the time for both developers and publishers that laid a lot of foundation of the success that we are seeing today. And Sophie talked about, the major players like your Tencents and even your ByteDance setting up their regional hubs here. I think thanks to a lot of that strong push from Moss Tan's agency, ministry, MTI, and the agencies like EDB, the STBs and all that, really kind of like helping to push to host some of these major events, right? I'm also seeing like progressive participation by other stakeholders. If you talk about just even in the government, like MCCY and all that, and I'm sure Moss Tan will talk more about it. But the two biggest progress perhaps I've seen is one is around the whole education training side of things. Republic Poly has launched a specialist diploma, right? And in esports, right? And it's not just about the playing, right? It's about the whole industry, the production, and all of that. And I think Skoga's campus tournaments are now one of the most highly viewed and participated in Singapore, right? With strong support, not just on the ground, but like support from the school leaders, and we talked about not just playing like your Dotas and your Mobile Legends, but also cycling esports, active esports. So a lot of progress on that front. And perhaps the second thing I'll call out is just the fact that the Global Esports Federation has anchored itself here in Singapore, right, and bring a lot of leadership globally, right? Just in some of the commissions and meetings I've had, I just always it just strikes me, right? Just the kind of connectivity and leadership that we're bringing to the rest of the world, and not just, it's both ways, right? Not just us kind of like giving and sharing, but just learning so much, and we're seeing progress so quickly in every country, every market, and sometimes baffling or mind-boggling to me, all that progress that we are seeing, and how everyone's kind of like through the leadership of GEF, leaning on to one another in terms of sharing knowledge and kind of like making progress together. Just amazing to me, and I'm just so glad that today we're here to talk about that.
Fantastic. Yeah. No, thanks, Nicholas. And I think you pretty much sort of queued up my next question, which I think goes to MOS, which is, even through our study, we're finding that one of the key things that's really important is a really clear government support, commitment, and efforts in this sector to really make it work. From the government side, MOS, what are some of the efforts that have been undertaken to help nurture and grow the space?
Thanks, Asahi. I see it in this way, where if you look at what Chris mentioned and also what Nicholas mentioned, is the brand as well as the key private sector players like Samsung, for example, and then key industry players, the likes which Nicholas has nurtured over a decade. What government can do, and government's key capability and key responsibility, is to make sure that we have the foundations for which all of the private sector side can then build upon. So Sophie mentioned earlier on, political stability, infrastructure, and the likes. If I were to go into specifics, this year or the last 20 months have been quite challenging. But in spite of the challenge, we've managed to host many of these key core gaming events. We have GamesCon. That was the first inaugural Asian edition. And I think that was key. We have Free Fire World Series. We're going to have M3. We had M2 last year. And many, many, many others. What this does, and when I was at GamesCon, I saw that firsthand, and I know how important it is to make sure that we open up, make sure that different key players can come in, play, talk, exchange ideas, exchange information, exchange business cards or digital business cards, and make sure that they can build upon what they've been doing in the industry side. What government can do then is so as what Nicholas mentioned earlier on, from the MTI, STB side, that's what we're doing. We're making sure that we can open and we have that foundation. IMDA, for example, last week had VidCon. And VidCon also is looking into making sure that we can build a whole generation of content producers. And that, again, to Sophie's presentation earlier on, will help to build up a lot of capabilities. It will help to build up a lot of talent in that space that is not just periphery and core, but also all of the different adjacent spaces for the industry. Then let me go into, if you don't mind, what Nicholas mentioned is the other hat, my MCCY hat. So Nicholas knows that I've been trying to pull both the MTI side and then the MCCY side together. I think both are very complementary because you have the sports, you have the youth on the MCCY side, and then you have the industry part at MTI, STB, etc. And of course, you have the IMDA colleagues as well. And I mentioned GamesCon earlier. One key aspect is to work with all of our industry and community partners. We talked about SCOGA, we have SGEA, also the Singapore Esports Association, SGGA, and of course, GEF. So many of these associations are working together. Government is helping to facilitate the conversations to make sure that we have a foundation from which then private sector can thrive, survive, and really build this whole industry. I'll just give you one key example about one of my organizations, the National Youth Council. We'll be partnering with SGEA and IMG to launch the Esports Youth Program, which will happen in conjunction with GEG 2021. And this Esports Youth Program will give about 100 students from all of our polytechnics, ITEs, and partner organizations for the opportunity for them to be hands-on. Right? They will attend workshops, panel discussions with industry leaders, content creators, and these are youths, and they will be directly involved with running the event. But we are not just stopping there. Even after GEG 2021, many of these selected individuals under this program will have the opportunity to undergo short-term industry internships with esports portal Gosu Gamers, SGEA, IMG, Global Sports Innovation Center, GSIC, like you guys, and technology companies like Refract. So we have many, many different ones. We have also, Nicholas, you will know Esports Academy, which is SCOGA's initiative supported by NYC. And then we also have a physical space right in the heart of our town, which is SCAPE, also under the National Youth Council, where we are prepared and we already have been prepared to make that a home or one of many homes for the esports community and our youth. So government is doing as much as we can, providing the stability, the infrastructure, bringing together all of the industry players to help you have a very strong foundation to grow the esports enterprise. Back to you, Asahi.
Thank you, Ernest. I think you touched on something clearly fundamental, which is the value proposition of esports to a nation has to go beyond, I think, just gaming. It has to have that wider value proposition of how it can grow the economy and have a wider impact on the sector. Equally, I think one of the challenges we found that got raised regularly was obviously some parental support behind, supporting a career in esports is very different once that becomes a career in technology or career in a wider adjacent sector that puts esports into a different context. So I think in many ways, this whole ability to be able to draw the adjacencies, to have the spillover effect is fundamentally critical to the success of the proposition. I mean, just from that perspective, Chris, I mean, in Samsung, obviously, you guys cover a huge adjacencies of industries. And I think Korea is also one of the best examples we've seen where actually almost perhaps by accident rather than design, the esports world, absolutely fostered and nurtured the whole generation of tech skills and tech human capital. So I wonder if from your experience, there's anything you can share with us in terms of, how do you actually realize those adjacencies, which are all very good in theory, but perhaps not always easy to bring to reality?
Well, let's see. I probably can't comment too much on Korea experience, but I think I can apply some of what I see around in similar initiatives out here, and especially understanding how Singapore works in some of these ways. With esports, we see that it's really pushing the envelope of the technology. Across the board, whether that's the network technology, the hardware on the device, and that's what we want to see continuing, because that will always open up all the new opportunities for the adjacent businesses that leverage that infrastructure. Whether that's just about any vertical, for example, can take advantage of the network benefits that open up with 5G and that we demonstrate with gaming. I think the metaverse is the perfect example of how that goes to that next level, because now I would expect esports is going to be at the forefront of driving the full integration of all the elements of the metaverse and in a real world experience that then basically is the proof point for it to be used in other fields, whether that's training, defense, or education. All of those will be able to benefit. And I think the way that Singapore has many incubators around all of these things, and there'll be esports and incubators, or there are already incubators around these other verticals. And when these come together, having them sit by each other and having the facilities, the infrastructure by its nature is going to, I think, drive the spillovers, because they'll be able to leverage the experiences and the infrastructure that's being developed by esports. For us, I think also, with new form factors like, for example, foldable devices, I'm excited to see how esports can take advantage of these full form factors and see where that goes.
Thanks, Chris. No, I think that sort of creating that nexus, I think, between, as you say, the infrastructure and the opportunity is probably absolutely critical. Nicholas, on the ground, you've probably seen individuals, friends go through an esports career and perhaps into other things, including yourself and others as well. What's been your experience so far of esports' ability to be a generator of human capital for the wider adjacent sectors, and what more could we be doing in Singapore to enable that?
Yeah, I think this topic, right, on talent development, human capitals, I think it's really important, right? And in fact, I would argue it's a key foundation, which Mostan has mentioned, a lot of support for the capabilities development in this aspect. I think maybe one thing to highlight or call out is that as opposed to other more traditional industries or traditional sports, things move really, really fast in terms of esports and gaming industry, right? One of the things that we need to avoid is to avoid training our youth in too specific skill sets. For example, like being a pro gamer in a specific game, and when they graduate, let's say, or they come out to the workforce, and a couple years later, the game is no longer popular or relevant. And we see that happen before, right? And that's always my advice to the gamers say, hey, I know you're really focused on wanting to be a pro player in this game, but what if this game is no longer popular in 2 years' time? What are you going to do? How are you going to have a sustained growth in a career in this industry, right? So I think where it really matters in as far as Singapore is concerned, when we talk about high value jobs, games design, development, we're pretty well covered. We have like a lot of game design schools that are doing really well. We have DigiPen and all that, right? And we also talked about the Skoga Esports Academy. We have the specialist diplomas. You have your Scapes, SGA, Skogas, engaging hundreds of youths in the industry, right? So I think that part is pretty well covered. Perhaps one thing to kind of like maybe call out based on my personal experience, I had the opportunity to manage Asia Pacific Japan for a division in Visa. And what was most important for my role at the time in a big corporate was actually a lot about the soft skills, right? Leadership, multicultural communications and all of that. And what strikes me is that actually esports prepares you for a lot of that and more, right? And it's not just about the technical skills, not just about fast reaction and all that, but really, if you think about high performance teamwork, high performing team, high performance leadership, that's a lot. You see that a lot in like sports, and now we're seeing that in esports. I've seen gamers succeed beyond just esports and gaming in industries which Mostan mentioned just now. Like I've seen them succeed in business. We have gamers who started companies like Aftershock, Secret Lab. I've seen them succeed in finance, right, in cybersecurity and all that. We're really looking at a whole generation of I want to almost say super digital natives, right? They're ready to join, participate, and empower the whole digital economy. Very exciting.
Brilliant. No, I think that's great. And I think from all of that, it seems apparent that, that there is a really strong case and increasingly real case examples that can demonstrate, the viability of this as a real economic engine. On the flip side, perhaps coming to you, MOS, in a moment, it is also recognized that people see risks, people see potential, especially at the rate things are moving. Issues such as addiction, other issues relating to social development. I think clearly this will tend to fall on the government in terms of an area of responsibility to consider. From Singapore's perspective, how do you see the balancing of capturing the benefits, the economic, the social, the health, etc., while also managing and mitigating potentially some of the risks associated with that?
Sahi, thank you. I think the key thing first is on the positive aspect to it, but what are the impediments towards potentially encouraging our youth to take on, or even past youth to take on careers here? And I think one of the impediments might be that maybe parents and also wider society may not know of the benefits of esports. So maybe, as Nicholas mentioned earlier on, some of them think that esports maybe it's just a very, very narrow aspect where you are just playing a specific game, either on mobile, either on console, on desktop. But I think what's important is to also share with parents and society at large that esports, as Nicholas has articulated, it's way bigger and way more expensive than just a gamer. And many adjacent industries, as we have spoken, Chris, myself, Nicholas has spoken already today, is that you can spawn new industries, new enterprises, new startups, but you also can have careers that are adjacent to the esports industry. And that could be in finance. You could be, in my own finance industry, where you're now focused a lot on crypto, but also high frequency trading, for example. Many of these skills sets can be ported. But again, as Nicholas mentioned, there are also soft skills that you take on, such as management, even in event management, right? Event management, you have to manage people, you have to set deadlines, you have to be able to coax and encourage people to get on board your ideas and execute on these ideas. So these are all the positives. But having been from the tech industry as well, I also understand that there are negatives. And these negatives are well documented. For example, gaming addiction, maybe antisocial behavior and the likes. And we acknowledge it. We know that if well managed and shaped, esports can be positive on youth, social, physical, and mental development. But if not well managed, then it could have an adverse effect, conversely. So we need to institute maybe a structured, regulated playing environment, cultivate prominent gamers as positive role models that can help instill responsible gaming behavior. And I think also what government can do and what the NYC, for example, is doing is we have these youth circles on esports and gaming. So we partner with the MCCY, which is my parent ministry, MCCY, the Ministry of Social and Family, and also the National Youth Council with youth leaders to implement ground-up initiatives to help youth navigate this. So things like encouraging positive gaming behaviors, address potential social concerns like gaming addiction, gambling risks, and also other kinds of downsides surrounding esports and gaming. We also have a Digital for Life movement where we're engaging esports stakeholders on creating better awareness on addictive gaming behaviors and cyberbullying. So we are very much well aware of the upside, but we're also very focused on mitigating the downside. And I think it takes the industry to be also, in a way, self-regulating. It requires government to form some form of regulation, but also best practices, and have NYC and other partners support our industry partners. And it also requires society at large to extol the benefits of esports, but also to help to guide, particularly our youths, to navigate the downsides of esports in the ways in which I mentioned earlier.
Yes. I think following on from that, one of the things I think that's clear is we're all still learning as we go somewhat on this. And as things evolve, we're still trying to figure out some of these answers of how do you get that balance right. I think one thing we are all probably looking to do is to learn from abroad and see what has been happening elsewhere. And I'll come to you, Nicholas, in a moment, but I think China's always been one interesting example. I think on one side, the recent changes have thrown up uncertainty in the market and potentially opportunities in the market for other countries. Equally, there's obviously a strong argument they remain one of the largest markets and the most well-established setup. I mean, Nicholas, I know that you've previously commented on this before, but I wondered sort of what are your thoughts about what can we learn from abroad, and perhaps in particular what has been happening around China?
Thanks, Asahi. I actually spoke about this on Xinhua News just last month, and the feedback was that segment got really popular. I think they said it overtook 11/11 in terms of virality and viewership. So I don't mind sharing some of those views here, right? Since I led my, I think, first trade mission to Beijing at a time in 2009, I've kept in touch and engaged with both industry and policymakers in China on gaming and esports, right? There are, in fact, some Singaporeans who've made billions in this industry in China, right? One of them is a close friend, Roland Ong, who published games like World of Warcraft and StarCraft 2 in China, right? So China has made some moves recently. I think Sophie mentioned it, right? That might be hard for the man on the street to really understand. But I think beneath the surface, I see them really setting the foundation for future growth, right? And policies like child safeguarding is really important. And to me personally as well, you can't expect, for example, a 7-year-old kid to be exposed to the harms of the internet or the metaverse with the likes of, let's say, for example, illegal betting and all that, and expect the industry to grow in a healthy and sustainable manner, right? So, in fact, in my conversations with policymakers in different jurisdictions around the world, many are kind of like looking to China, right? Watching, learning from China. And I would argue that in many regards, China is the top or number one esports and gaming market in the world, right? But this growth can only be sustained when you have the right regulatory levers to help the industry grow. And I think, actually, I would say that many markets around the world, including countries around the world, including Singapore, are actually quite envious of some of the levers that China will have to, and I think are looking to see how they can learn, right? So I may have more of a contrarian view, but I'm of the view that in this aspect, China is actually ahead, and they will continue to learn, continue to evolve, and they continue to progress. And I think we can all watch and maybe learn from what they're doing.
That's really interesting. That's a very interesting view. And perhaps, Christopher, just coming over to you. I mean, you see across the whole Southeast Asia region and Oceania. Are there any, highlights or examples for you that, Singapore could learn from, or anything that you're seeing that's interesting and of note?
I mean, from my experience, I've seen. It's unfortunate. Myanmar has always been very aggressive in esports, and that kind of caught me off guard. I think Indonesia these days has really taken off, and so for me, I think the opportunity is as I mentioned earlier, to how do we regionalize this as a brand that has this regional coverage. It is a bit of a Wild West in some ways, and I think brands would benefit from having more structure, especially to run initiatives across the region in that way. So that's my hope going forward, and working with some of these big Singapore events, and finding how do we link them in to what's going on in some of these countries, because in the countries they have a whole slew of events, from the professional to the community events and grassroots events. So there's a huge opportunity for us to work across all of these things, but we need to be able to do it efficiently and effectively and consistently. So my job is to take the best practices and share those across and do that. But I think that Singapore is super well positioned to help drive that and structure it across the region.
Thanks, Chris. And obviously, throw this back to you, MOS, I guess, from a government perspective. But Singapore has always historically effectively played that role of being a gateway into Southeast Asia. It's also always effectively been a fantastic bridge between East and West, and also managing to, I think, leverage its competitive advantages effectively for its size and so on and so forth. How do you see the international perspective now going forward? Given what Nicholas said about China, perhaps what Chris has already shared about the Southeast Asian market, feels like it's only going to get more competitive. And so, how do we see sort of Singapore's position going forward in that?
Yeah, Sahi, I think the opportunity set for Singapore is very clear. It has always been, and is to be the Asia global node, not just for the e-gaming industry, but many others as well. I mean, if you've seen even last year, our FAI into Singapore, $17.4 billion. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We're continuing to welcome many kinds of investment across the whole spectrum. Advanced manufacturing, for example, precision engineering, tech, high tech, deep tech, med tech, for example, but also many other different industries that will require a base for them to expand outside of their traditional areas, like in the US or in Europe, to land in Asia, to work closely with the ecosystem that we are trying to create. We talked about ecosystems. We talked about, Chris's Samsung is here. We have Tencent is here, Google, Amazon, for example, TikTok. So many of these ecosystem play is something where we will continue to make sure that Singapore remains attractive too. In light of geopolitical tensions, in light of supply chain bottlenecks, Singapore must always be open, connected to businesses, investments, and also talent. The likes of Chris, right? You're here as well. I think you're a PR. So we must always be open to all of these different opportunity sets. What is very critical is that there are many different areas, and coming from the private sector, I've seen that the competition is fierce, the competition is tough. And in light of the pandemic, we must have a very clear value proposition. Sophie described it earlier on. Infrastructure, strong political stability. Stability in terms of whether you can do your business here and you are prepared and you are clear that you know that your IP is protected, you know that your investments are protected, and you know that you have strong rule of law. You also then know that you have a good supply of talent from which you can build your businesses, and make sure that you can then serve both the ASEAN market but also APAC market. So I just wanted to just leave you with this, that Singapore is very much committed to our global Asia Node strategy, and we'll do all that we can to ensure that we are relevant to the world, and also particularly for the esports industry, with partners like Nicholas and others. We're driving this so that we can capture the opportunity set for Singapore.
Fantastic. No, I think that's incredibly clear. We're aware that we're beginning to come towards the end of this session, and perhaps in a moment I'll just hand back over to the panel for some closing remarks to the audience. But I think what we're hearing and learning today, Singapore has the building blocks. Clearly, it has the building blocks. It has a huge set of competitive advantages that makes it a real opportunity for becoming a hub. Equally, what's become very clear is I think there's so much happening on the ground already in Singapore, not only in the private sector, but also from the government side, where I think MOS has clearly articulated that there is a concerted effort to support this industry, both on capturing the benefits, but also working to mitigate on the risk side. And I think from Chris's view, what's clear is perhaps there's a little bit more that needs to be done from everybody to try to really capture that brand opportunity. Brands perhaps are still exploring and still looking for that fit and link into the sector, and perhaps more can be done both from the government, both from the private sector locally, to try to really engage and help the brand succeed in this space. So overall, it's been a fascinating session, and I think it's very much corroborated our title, Singapore, Gaming's Global Hub. I think it has every opportunity of becoming that. Perhaps to just finish off, I'll maybe start with Chris, go to Nicholas, and then finish off with MOS. Just any closing remarks, Chris?
Well, number one, thank you so much for inviting me in my my early experience with esports. I'm really excited about this area. I think it's incredibly important, not only to Singapore, but to businesses to address the core future segment of all of our business. And you mentioned that there's more to do, but my intention is to say that there's a huge opportunity for growth, and that there's already been demonstrated value, and companies are going to quickly catch up and get more and more involved, and that is, I think, really exciting. And there are opportunities that we can't even imagine right now that we'll be seeing in the coming years.
Right, Nicholas.
Yeah, under the leadership of especially like MOS Tan, the government has really done a lot and pushing really hard, and been a while, right? Not just recently. I think since over 10 years ago. Maybe one thing I will highlight is just the role of the industry, the private participation, especially when it comes to investments, right? Not just the government investing, just co-investing. With Mighty Bear, we've seen a number of private sector investors like Rocket Internet investing in that, and that's really helped to fuel and the growth, support of Apple and Disney and all that. And just recently, there was an announcement that our local content meme company called SGAG, right, just took in a significant $10 million US investment, not just from Pavilion Capital, but also from Quest Ventures, which is all the private investments and all. I think that's really, really exciting. I think Singapore, with a strong foundation, is a great place to take in not the investments, right, and not just from government, but really from the private sector, private investors, and to really fuel the growth of the industry. Very exciting.
Very exciting indeed, Nicholas. Finally, MOS.
Asahi, Chris, Nicholas, thank you for this really interesting and exciting conversation. I think for me, even though we were extolling all the benefits of Singapore and also talking about the downsides, I just wanted to just share that, for us, we know that maybe our work is maybe 1% done. And Singapore, we want to be bold, we want to be Singapore Unlimited. And Singapore Unlimited means that there is a lot more ways to go, as Chris mentioned earlier on. That means there is a lot that we know, and maybe a lot that we don't know. But our main topic here is Singapore Gaming's Global Hub. I don't think we're there yet, but we want to get there. And to get there, government can only do that much. We can try to crowd some of the funding. We can help to create the infrastructure, provide all of the different support. But there is plenty that we don't know. There's plenty that we can still do a lot better to build the industry. And I just ask for all of you, all the industry players, to give us ideas, and we'll be open to it. I mean, many of the ideas we are already very much open to. There are some ideas where we have to take some time to think through, but I just wanted to give an assurance that we are a government that is open to these ideas, open to investments, open to innovation, and for you to work closely with us to make this happen. So our work is just only 1%, maybe 2% done, of huge work to do, but work with us and we want to build this together. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Singapore Unlimited, I think that's a great note to wrap the session on. So on behalf of, first of all, the panelists, Chris, Nicholas, MOS, thank you so much again for your time and for your contribution. Sophie, thank you very much for a great presentation to kick us off. And on behalf of everyone here, we say thank you to all of you for listening, and hope you all have a great convention going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.